Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight's Professor Pixel with tonight's episode, Twin Peaks, Season 3, Episode 8. Pixel, this is a pretty interesting episode, and for all the fans out there of Twin Peaks, if you had no idea where the hell any of this stuff came from, this episode may have the answers for you. It's going to go back in time a little bit, which is really the first time we've done this. It's going to plant some, what I like to think of as philosophical seeds on the nature of man, good versus evil. It's a very Lynchian episode in that we get a lot of extended scenes of one or two things, and that is it. So to me, I'll start off by saying here, Pixel, that this episode is interesting. I didn't hate it. It's definitely not light. There's definitely no goofing off in here at all. Overall, to me, it's a very dark episode and it's kind of creepy. And boy, when I talked about in season 2 all the stupid stuff, wanting to get some adult themes, you don't get really more darker than what you get in here too, in terms of good and evil and heaven and hell, or however you want to look at it too. But interesting. It does not follow the typical convention of any Twin Peaks episodes in general that we've talked about. What's your initial thoughts?
I do not do drugs, but I imagine this is what it's like to do drugs. This episode is a trip in itself, but it doesn't start that way. It starts out quite normal, so I guess we should just take it away. First thing we see is Ray and Doppeldale in the car. They're driving. Doppeldale takes out his phone, and he says there's 3 tracking devices on the car, so he shuts those down, and he quickly sends a message as they pull up behind a truck, and I believe it might have been the license plate. I'm not sure. It was DEGWW8. Eventually, the truck is gone, and Ray says that he hopes that Dale isn't upset with him. Doppeldale isn't upset with him, and grateful that he helped him out. And how did he know? Doppeldale goes on to say that Daria told him what happened. And Ray asks, where is she? And so he goes ahead and says, oh, well, she's waiting for a call. At that moment, Dale is saying that he bets that Ray wants to go to a place called the farm. And Ray says, yeah, that's something. And Ray goes on to talk about how he knows he has something he wants in his head. Apparently, he has a great memory, something like that. And Ray is saying that, I think that what I know might be worth some money. And Dale's not looking quite happy in that moment. Then they head off the highway. They're driving down, and Ray eventually asks to pull over because he needs to take a leak. Doppeldale allows it. He then, once Ray is out of the car, grabs the friend of his in the glove compartment, the loaded gun. He makes sure to check it. And then he steps out saying he wants the information. And Ray isn't sounding willing, so he goes ahead to go and shoot him, but it doesn't work. Ray turns around and says, tricked you, and shoots him. And this is where the drug trip begins, because we see the dark figures. We've only seen one thus far, but in all black except for the eyes, running up, and they are pulling at Doppeldale, and Ray is just staring in horror as he's being covered in his own blood. Then one lifts up his head, and another against his chest. His face begins to shift, and we see what looks to be Bob. Ray runs after that, driving off, and eventually the men fade away. I'm going to go ahead and let you take over while we're still on normal territory.
Yeah, I think that this scene sets up pretty much the template of the rest of the episode, where it's going to be extended, and it's like I say, there's no funnies in this too. A couple of things that struck me about Doppeldale here is that, with what we've seen in some of these episodes, even going back to the first one or two, the dude's like this IT expert, and so I don't know how the hell he learned it or how he digested it. I don't know if having some essence of the real Dale, maybe Dale knew it, but Dale doesn't strike me as that IT guy. Because I was like, man, this guy really knows how to do computer stuff. Remember, he was breaking the stuff when we first heard about some of the info from Garland Briggs when he hacked the site and the FBI got involved. And the other thing too is when he took the gun out, it looked like there were bullets in there, but I guess they were blanks or whatever. And I'm like, how did he not know it was loaded? It just seemed kind of goofy here. And obviously, the situation here is for us to see what we see and for these two guys to split up. I do like how Ray isn't dead in this episode. Like, he just doesn't die off. And he's a small character, but I think he's given off very strong, powerful, competent vibes. I've enjoyed his presence that this actor's given. I think it's solid. Um, I just felt a little confused by that. As far as the writing part of it goes, that's just hard to, forget, even despite the fact that the scene here is overshadowed by a really tremendous looking bit. Like you say, okay, we have no idea what these shadows are. And we talked about seeing them in the jail cell. We talked about seeing one walking through the hallway when um, Ernie Hudson's secretary lady, not secretary, but his underling, when she went to go visit the body, how we saw one down the hall. But I think we even commented on it then. We don't see her seeing this body. I don't believe, if I remember correctly. So this is all starting to make sense. So in a way, it's weird because these shadowy figures come up and they take a lot of the blood that's come out of his body and kind of almost like pat it on him. And I imagine the special effects here aren't what we would call detailed, but they're very creepy and very effective, even with the stupid strobing, flashing white light and all that too. And Ray, to me, really did look beside himself, like, what the F is going on here too. And like I said, this actor's done a great job. We just like Hastings, the principal played by what's his face, the Scooby-Doo guy from Scream. We know who we're talking about. He has done a great job. We haven't seen him, so it's like, okay, is he ever going to come up? I guess so. So we're getting these big gaps of stuff that, it's 18 episodes. So it's taking its time. I'm not having a problem with it, but it almost looks like they're doing some sort of like weird like dance around it or something, because when Ray panics and just takes off, we're going to see that, of course, Dale didn't really die. He kind of comes back to life. And yes, that looked like Bob to me as well. He's talking to somebody on the phone as he's driving off about how he saw something in Cooper and thinks he's dead, but if not, he knows where I'm going, so I'll kill him when he gets there. And we'll see, it might be what we're all talking about. We have no idea what's going on, but this translates into a scene that I popped hard for, and I thought of you because I know you're not the biggest fan of having different music groups just kind of end an episode, and I agree it's a bit anticlimactic. But what I really, really liked was Nine Inch Nails, one of the few bands I really liked out of the 90s. They scored, was it the Quake soundtrack, the video game there, which is an incredible game back in the mid 90s. They give him plenty of screen time, and he has, I guess, some history with David Lynch doing some music for, was it Lost Highway or something? And I thought it was kind of neat. And I didn't know if this was going to turn into something else because they're in the middle of the episode or early on rather than at the end, but they don't. And I'm like, you know what? You can do what the F you want, Dave Lynch. It's your money. It's your show. For me, this scene worked here, even though nothing happens about it. I just think it sets a tone for it. Like I say, this episode has a lot of long scenes, and we've only covered about 2 of them, really.
Did you know that this song was apparently written for Twin Peaks?
No, not really. Maybe it was in something else already. Maybe he wrote it specifically for this because they, like I say, they have a relationship. I'm glad he did it. It just works. It adds that adult level of, creepiness and mature themes that I've said I've always thought Twin Peaks would be better at if we went there rather than the high school angle, which I didn't mind again. But this season 3 is just so head and shoulders above season 2. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, it's definitely working here too. But yeah, like I say, the template is different because even though that's like a music video kind of sort of, we see Dale rise up and he's all bloody or whatever. And that's it before we get to a very big scene where they finally actually go back in time, which I don't recall that they've done before, at least not like this. So let's pause there so you can catch up, and then actually you go ahead and take the 45 scene.
Yes. July 16th, 1945. White Sands, New Mexico. There's a countdown. And before long, they reach one, and there's an explosion. We can see the mushroom clouds as we move slowly towards it as the music gets quite shrill. Eventually, we enter the mushroom cloud, and that's when we can see the details of it, the light, and within it, these waves of darkness. And that's when the screen begins to change. There's a black screen with dots, and then they add on orange filters as we switch in between a shaken black screen with these white, almost like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like worms almost rising from the top and the bottom. And we push on, and we're traveling through the smoke again. And then colors start to emerge, and it looks like we're almost in a galaxy. We push on, and after the smoke, we see a gas station. There's a door, and it keeps opening and closing, and we can see smoke slowly coming from it. And it's like that one place where the real Dale was, where the one woman that we thought was Audrey for half a second was also near the Purple Ocean, something like that.
Yes.
And we can see eventually, as a light comes from the window, and it seems that the gas station has blown up as well, men just covered in black except for their eyes walk out of the station, and they keep glitching around as well, and it's almost sped up. They almost seem to emerge from that light, and then we're starting to lose focus on the gas station as light envelops it completely, and we travel through a swirl. We then see a figure floating through space. It looks kind of like a woman, except it doesn't have a real face. So perhaps like that one alien that we saw at the very beginning of this season, the one that we thought was
in the glass box, you mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And she is spitting up something vaguely reminiscent of creamed corn, if you ask me. And we see this black orb, and we see the face of Bob before we travel through into the orange and the black once more, as there's this bead of liquid that seems to approach us. And as we're traveling through the black, there's red that appears. It's almost like it's raining upon us, raining blood. Before we finally see that purple ocean I mentioned before. We're approaching the island, and we are taken up along the tower, and we see an opening. And we enter it, and that's when it cuts. Do you want to take over now, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, let's pause, because I think there's a lot to digest here.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're not a fan of David Lynch and what he does, you will not like this. Obviously, watching season 3, knowing season 1 and 2 are behind us, we can kind of ask ourselves some questions, which might make it a little bit more muddled. But ultimately, it's us as a viewer what we put on it that we take away from it. And I'm going to rant for a moment, because here on the Xtreme Movie Show, we've covered a few science fiction films, and a lot of times we get in stupid arguments like, well, Star Wars is science fiction. No, it's not. Just a lot of space opera with things that take place in outer space or in the future, people automatically deem as science fiction. The whole idea of science fiction, classic science fiction as it were, if you're really hardcore into it, to me, is there's something about the natural world that affects humankind, and if it does so on enough of a scale, how will it affect us? And so, you might have some goofy stuff like, well, what if everybody died by the time they were 30, like in Logan's Run, or this or that? And it's interesting to explore it on a social level based off of some inherent natural world phenomenon. I think, without knowing Lynch, He doesn't come across as what we would call the classical liberal type, because he's an older gentleman in the 70s rather than the liberals that are present today. And liberal you can take as which is what you want out of it, but politically speaking, what I'm saying is that a lot of science fiction hardcore went away in the 40s and started transitioning in the 50s with the whole idea of atomic energy and the bomb. A lot of comic books got their kind of idea from here, something that's more human than human. If you're a superhuman, why are you dealing with a human? I mean, that's you're not human. And here, I think Lynch is using it to say this is where good and evil of mankind has been born. Like, we've lost our innocence, if you want to look at it that way. It's, wartime, 1945, they're working on nuclear warheads, obviously dropping, was it Fat Man and Little Boy on, was it Nagasaki and the other city, not Tokyo, but the other one, ended the war. And if I'm not into all that stuff, but I just know that the significance of, oh my gosh, this unknown energy that we didn't even know if we could control when we drop these bombs, how would that would affect a society? So a lot of times you had in the 50s those stupid creature feature movies, like, gigantic spiders or gigantic this or that. And Godzilla, of course, from the Japan created totally as a way to kind of basically say, hey, this is our creature. This is what America did to us back in World War II. And you can argue whether these things are right or wrong, or the politics. So I'm looking at it from the film perspective, that I think he's basically saying this is what all this means, because we see here in the birth of, I agree with you, it looks like an alien, but looks like a female version, maybe not as creepy, but with the figure you can kind of see it. To me, whether that's cream corn, I don't think that's a bad analogy, but yeah, if you're not watching it, you do miss in the black part of the goo that she's expelling the face of Bob, because it goes kind of quick, and we'll talk about something else here in a moment, a different face. But to me, this is just having an extended appreciation for, we didn't know on the world what was going to happen when we tested bombs, and we weren't the only country to do it, but we were one of the first ones, and was really a big deal. And you even got to the point where you had people start to get into like population control, and then you start getting really political stuff, and you had a lot of different types of sci-fi in the 60s and 70s with those authors. But that being said, it's amazing to me that you get somebody like Lynch in the 70s reaching back to somebody or to some topic like this that a long time ago was really a concern for everybody. How did we know it would stop? How do we know this mushroom cloud wouldn't just envelop the whole world? It's pretty interesting, and I'm seeing that from like a scientific background. And I think this is what David Lynch loves to do. Oh, I want to suggest this, and I'll do it by putting in these colors, and I'll show what looks to be like rain or the stars or the nebula, or whatever you described it. And I gotta say this, I gotta admit, I had forgotten about this purple vast ocean that we saw Dale in briefly with the lady with her mouth sewn shut. I totally forgot all about that to this point. And I'm going, okay, what's the significance of this? If they had just left it at the nuclear stuff, I would have gotten it. But yeah, when we get here and we see this tower, part of me goes, oh no, I don't need a secret underground layer in Twin Peaks. I'm going, well, did we see the shape of this facility before? Because it's obviously something, and of course it's completely pitch dark. It's a little weird, and yet it's a very stylized scene to it, where you have a woman that I don't believe we've seen before.
Nope.
And this is all shot in black and white, and it looks like the Liberty Bell, but it's not. It's obviously some sort of thing that's got some sort of
I called it
capacitor looking things at the top. Yeah, and it's just interesting. She's listening to it like a Victrola. She's just looking around, and we see the older version of what we've called the giant appear literally out of nowhere and look at her. And I gotta admit, I'm gonna say this about this episode overall, but about this whole extended scene here, it's interesting. Don't know if I like it. Maybe because it's one long chunk here that we're talking about. Not sure. He looks concerned. He's dressed in his was it nice black and white little outfit I'm taking a look at here right now, like he's getting ready to go to the ball. He looks at the device. He looks at her. He walks up a flight of stairs really slowly. He goes around to what I would only describe as a theater room that is doubling to me as what I would call a war room, where things turn on. Because you know what? It reminds me of the Muppets, where you had the two old dudes sitting in the balcony.
Yeah.
It looks exactly like that to me, and I'm looking at that going, oh my god, that looks just like from the Muppets. But he looks at the screen that's there, and he sees some of the shots we talked about before with these men that looks like they appear out of the nuclear fire at this gas station or whatever. And I don't know if those men are supposed to be the men we saw raised Dale. I don't think so. I think they're two different sets. And in case we missed it, he's seeing what we saw too, the picture of the goo being expelled, but he's focused on, and you definitely can clearly tell here, he sees Bob's face in a black piece of the goo. So it's like out of the, primordial soup, as it were, you get good and you get evil, or you get diametrically opposed things, and we put those labels on him. And then he just floats up literally with just by himself, and a lady kind of walks in and she's watching him. Again, remember, this is black and white. This is very like weird. And he looks like he's kind of like floating on his back, and he gets this really like yellowy, sparkly effect coming out of his mouth. And it seems like it grows into a small cloud. And from that, a piece of golden goo, like an orb, floats out to there, which made me think of when we've talked about cream corn before, how we've said stuff like this before. She grabs it, holds it. It's the only thing, again, that's colorized in here. It's got kind of like this amber glow to it. She stares into it, looks, and we see an extremely familiar face. It is your favorite way to end episodes. It's the prom picture, or the yearbook picture of Laura Palmer that we would see at the end of every episode in like season 1, season 2, at the very end. And this lady gives it a kiss, lets it go. It floats up in what looks to be like this steampunk, cyberpunkish kind of gold tube that then rolls around or whatever, like a pinball machine, and it slowly comes out like a drop of water on the screen, which is now projecting not a globe, but it looks like a globe, the map of the entire world here too. And we kind of see it land in the United States. Like I say, very extended, but we'll stop there because there's a lot to digest. That's a good 10 minutes.
This is in 1945.
Yes.
So the way I took it was that the giant laying back, that was part of a spirit that was leaving him. And through that, Laura Palmer is supposed to be formed. The only problem is this is in 1945. And so Laura Palmer's not going to be born for a little while longer. So I don't get the point of sending the spirit to Earth yet.
Well, it takes time.
Well, yes, I guess it's going to take some time, because we see in 1945, once again, as the year begins to change. And it slowly goes to 1956, August 5th, New Mexico desert. And we see an egg in the sand. And slowly, from the shell, we see it hatch into this weird frog bug. It's really
look kind of like a beetle to me, maybe.
It has legs that hop like a frog.
It's weird looking. It's creepy looking. Let's be honest. All these effects, no matter how much we're describing it, they're sinister looking. They're not goofy or cheesy, bad practical or CGI. I mean, I know we're saying in a frog, right? But it's creepy looking. It's like, oh, this is no good.
Yeah. And eventually we see it starting to move around before we get a shot of the moon. We then go to a boy and a girl, and he's asking, "Did you like my song?" And she's like, "Yeah, I liked your song." And as they're walking, she stops, sees a penny and picks it up and says, "It's heads up. That's good luck." And that's when they continue to walk, as the boy says that he wishes that her good luck. Then we see a shadowed figure land along with another onto the desert, and they are beginning to walk. We see a couple driving, and they're about to pass by them, but the one stops them, walks up to the window, and says, "Got a light, got a light, got a light." As the sound is starting to shift, we hear like sparks somewhere along the way, and the wife is screaming, and it's this really warped scream. It's like, before they drive off. We go back to the girl, and she asks the boy if he lives in town. He does, and she asks, "Is it by the school?" And he's like, "How did you know that?" Girl says she just knows. She thought he was going with a girl named Mary, and he says, no, that's over. But he's not sad about it, and the girl thinks it's good. She thanks him for walking her home, and that's when he asks for a kiss. She's a little unsure, but gives in. They have their kiss, and they say goodbye, and he walks away. And then we move back to one of the figures in black. Looks like Abe Lincoln, as he's walking to a radio station, KPJK radio. There's music playing, a man reading the paper. We see a person in a diner. A diner I believe we visited before. And a mechanic working in a garage. And the girl just smiling on her bed. Abe Lincoln in black is walking. It's not actually Abe Lincoln, but with that beard and that facial structure, it looks like he's trying to play that. He walks into the station. There's a woman working at the front desk, and he asks once again, "Got a light?" before he grabs her head and smashes it with one hand. She hits the ground, and he continues to walk into the broadcasting room. And he grabs the man's head, and the music dies. The man goes on to grab the microphone as he goes on to say, "This is the water. This is the well. So drink full and ascend. The horse in the white of the eyes and the dark within." And he continues to repeat. We see the diner lady pass out, the mechanic pass out. We cut to the frog bug crawling as we can hear it still. And we see the girl, and she moves to the radio to turn it off, but she doesn't pass out. She just goes ahead and just lays down. We see the frog bug then hop and fly into the window, and it moves slowly to the girl as the voice continues, and the girl opens her mouth, and the frog bug just climbs in. Not Abe Lincoln in black is still smashing the guy's head as he repeats. And finally, he stops speaking as he just continues to crush, blood pouring out as his fingers just dig into his skull. And then he walks out. The light flashes a couple times before he walks into the darkness. And that's when the credits begin, but it doesn't stop there because we see the girl once more sleeping. There's a slight scratch in the air, almost like from the phonograph at the beginning of this season. As the shadows, and I don't know if you noticed this, the shadows looked like they were shifting a little behind her. And that is the end.
Yeah, it seems like we haven't said a lot, but like I say, it's just a few big key scenes, and that's it. Let me ask you this before I'll go from 1956 forward. And generally speaking, were you getting any religious vibes from this at all?
No.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was in there or not. So, because it seems like if anything, they've been absent. And so that's why I went the more philosophical route with the good and evil, the constructs that we put on stuff, good and bad. And to your point, well, it's 1945 and we see a picture of Laura. How are we going to know this ahead of time? It's a valid question. Just like the question, why does time only seem to flow in one direction? Because some people say when you get to a singularity, the rules of Newtonian mechanics break down and time can go backwards. And that's where you might have the opportunity to have wormholes and things jump and the whole timeline crap thing, right? So why is that important? Because here, like you said, when we get to 1956, obviously some time has gone by. And again, this is still shot in black and white. And most of this episode is at night. I thought it was interesting because we saw in a couple episodes these creepy guys. I called them the black ghosts because they, we said we're not sure that anybody actually saw them, but we've seen them moving around. So I'm like, okay, I don't know what they're going for. Obviously, one seemed like it might have been going towards Garland Briggs' body. or he was in a cell with Hastings. So I don't know what the connection is there. If there is one, I mean, who knows? That seems like so long ago, 6-7 episodes ago. But at night, this is that classic, couple slows down, see something they don't like, and they scream and run off too. Yeah, these are different guys. I don't know who these guys are, that gotta light guys. It's very kind of unnerving to watch them to go by, because the way it's shot, you don't see really any lights at all as they're driving. You literally only see the lights from the lights of their car going through. So it's very dark and creepy. It's something that doesn't get used a lot. I noticed in a lot of TV shows and everything else, this perspective where the camera's right behind the driver, like you're in a back seat looking forward. It's very effective and very simple. And I wonder why it's not used a lot. But when we see this young couple, obviously being courted, the young gentleman is walking the lady home. She's got the big Bobby thing going on in a poofy dress, and she's a cutie pie, and he's a handsome young fellow too, but he's simping hard. He's like, "Can I have a kiss, please?" I was about to pop her because I thought she was going to say something like, Garland, I really appreciate you walking me home tonight. I was like, oh, are we going to get a little Garland Briggs backstory? I don't know that it is or it isn't, and I don't think that is, because I was thinking, I don't know why I thought that, but this is when
I
he
was
was
thinking
probably a young
Leland.
kid, and he's in the military, and they're, so I'm just trying. My brain is rushing to put things together that may not fit without thinking about it. What were you saying?
I was thinking Leland.
Oh, Leland Palmer? Who knows? Lehman, I think, would have just went and kissed her rather than asked for it and been that, but we don't know. Obviously, she's really interested in him, and this is old-fashioned courtship and being a proper gentleman, and no tattoos, dressed well, and walking the lady home at night, giving her a nice little kiss, looking at each other, going. And so it's the real deal. I will say, though, I was starting to get a little bit, I don't know if confused is the right word. I didn't know or feel where it was going with these people walking, because I don't know what to call them. They've got beards and like sailor hats on. And when they approach the radio station too,
Could call them Dark Souls, I guess, like the video game.
the Dark Souls, like the video game. Well, let's do that. Okay, so the Dark Souls. I'm like, okay, I don't understand why the radio thing is present, but radio obviously was a big deal back then. A lot of information transmitted there. I like this because this really harkens back to like old times when things were simpler and they were a certain way, but still kind of fresh. You see the girl just kind of, daydream a little bit with the window open. So the bug's coming for her just because she's the only female around, except for the older one at the diner. Why are these guys going in and killing the secretary? Obviously, they're going to do something here. And yeah, it was neat seeing how the radio stations, electronics, are so big and bulky. And now we have probably 10,000 times that kind of electronic power sitting here as we're doing this stream. It's just incredible to me how that is. And I don't know the whole God of Light thing. Maybe that's an inside joke. Maybe it'll mean something later on. But I'm kind of not gonna lie. I pretty much ignored this whole little spiel thing he was talking, because we get numbers early on and stuff. I'm like, you know what? Whatever, I'll deal with that if and when that comes up. But I know they're going to hold it forever, so I'm not going to lie to you. I've intentionally ignored all that kind of stuff, just like I did here. Yes, it's going to be significant. Yes, it's going to be prophetic. But at this point in this episode, with all this crap going on, I'm kind of a little bit over it. I want something to kind of happen, so I'm being a little impatient. I admit, but it is a nice little setup here too, because it's like, oh, here's a diner. You said you thought we had seen this diner before.
Yep.
Pop's Diner. I just don't recall when or where.
The setup looks exactly like the diner in what's it called, in Fire Walk with Me.
Oh, maybe. That was a while ago when we reviewed that here on the Xtreme Movie Show. Check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, as we're closing up here too, I gotta sit there and say that the guy freaks out. The bug does what it's going to do. It's going to go in there. And I think she passed out like everybody else did. I don't think she's just sitting there. I think she passed out listening to the radio station. And you see the bug crawl into her mouth, and it's disgusting and it's creepy. But hey, you eat something, it becomes a part of you. If I eat you, I take some of your soul and your powers or whatever. So I'm wondering if this is supposed to be like the Bob element coming to Earth in the form of an egg. This is a weird enough looking creature where it's like you say, it's like I called it more like a beetle because of the way it looked in its in the wings, but then it does have the froggy thingy. So I think we'll both at least agree it's some kind of insect, I guess. And that made me think either biblical or Egyptian, just because of insects and how they relate to depending on how your viewpoint is of some of those things there too. But I looked at this as the evil force, but then I didn't know who these guys were either. So is it confusing? Yeah, but I think the solution to something like this, if you're watching, you don't get it, is just you take a step back and say, okay, I'll just give names to this stuff, and when it has some attachment to something, I can anchor it to it, might make sense, and then I might get it more. And I think that's one of the things about this episode in general that I said before. It's interesting. Don't know if I like it. I don't mind it, and you don't really see it a lot today because do we care about these characters we've hardly seen? Well, the giant, older looking giant guy, well, we kind of know him, but we're not emotionally invested in him, right? The guy walking a young woman home, okay, that was a nice scene, but we don't know them or think we know them at this point. They're indistinguishable. So it's supposed to be, I think, be an unsettling episode. We're not really emotionally latching on to anything, and all of it pretty much is brand new. It's unknown. So I think the choice to do it this way in this episode was spot on with giving all of these scenes a long period of time to breathe. Whether it's a philosophical meditation or whatever, now we're gonna have to start thinking about this on like a cosmic scale of good and evil. And the only time I felt like we were close to this was way back in early season 2, I think it was, when Garland Briggs disappeared. God, is that? Yeah, I think that was season 2. And then he had reappeared in front of his wife, and time had, first thing he asked was, what year is it? What time is it? And time had passed, and we didn't really get to see much of that. Like we said before, unfortunately, that actor had passed. So how they're going to fill in his role, and he's a military guy, and he was old enough at the time where he may have been involved in some of this stuff here, because this is super top secret back in New Mexico. It's like, I just feel like somehow his spirit, no pun intended, is going to be involved in all this here. Yeah, like I say, interesting episode. I'm not going to try to put too much more into it. I babbled a lot about philosophical crap rather than practical. I just think this is one of those episodes where that's all you can really do. What other thoughts did you have about this episode in general?
I'm not a fan of concerts in the middle of episodes, and I didn't say that before when I was focused on saying what song Nine Inch Nails were playing.
Right.
But this episode, while it has a lot of interesting things, it would never be shown on TV. The producers would look at this and say, "What the hell are you thinking?" Because,
wasn't it shown on TV?
well, it was shown on Showtime. And
Correct.
David Lynch had all the control. If he was still doing this for ABC or whatever the station was, it wouldn't have never flown. Just the pitch of it would have been like, "What the hell are you doing?" This is, I said before we started recording, it makes more sense than Eraserhead. At the same time, this is the Eraserhead of the Twin Peaks episodes.
I thought the music was incredible. It was very uncomfortable to listen to. It was very effective for what it was in, and this is one of those things like back in the day when I was a kid, everyone marked out over 2001 Stanley Kubrick Space Odyssey, and I knew several people that thought it was tremendous and several people that went, yeah, I saw it when I was on drugs or not on drugs, and I still don't get it. And I'm like, well, I can't. Well, some people say different consciousness may be required for certain things to make sense. And the whole subculture of drugs came from the military trying to make super soldiers and whatnot. And a lot of that also kind of comes into some science fiction as well once we get into the 50s and 60s. And once the lid's been taken off all the experiments the United States government had done without people's knowledge or consent over time, I think added a much needed bit of paranoia and skepticism to that stuff. And to this day, a lot of that stuff doesn't get talked about or it gets looked down. But the whole drug thing, to find some other plane of consciousness, I've always wondered in Twin Peaks if there's an element to that, because, we saw what Bobby and Mike run on drugs. And guess what? drugs are still getting run here now 20 years later, 25 years later, right? Not that it's a big deal. It's a recreational sort of thing. But when you talk about the military and you talk about altered states, it's a thing, I can say, and it's real and it's legit, but I don't think it's going to really mean much to it. But when you talked about all the stuff that you would see, it kind of is like going to a cosmic concert. And if you're bonkered out of your mind, you might reach a level of consciousness you've never had before, and it makes sense. I don't know, but that's for anybody to experience. But I did want to say this. You did not know who the group was that was playing at the end of the show either? That 50s doo-wop kind of sound on the radio, did you?
No.
It's the Platters. There's the Coasters, there's the Platters, Little Richard, all these sorts of places. He's got one of these voices, that lead singer.
Oh,
that is tremendous. Yes.
Yeah, no, I know the group, the Platters. Yeah, I didn't know the song, but I know the group.
Okay, well, as soon as I heard that voice, I went, oh, what is that? And I was like, it's a song that I'm not that familiar with, but I thought that was pretty neat because when you talk about the 50s, you talk about rock and roll coming on, you talk about pop bands. He's the kind of guy that you just had a voice that it didn't matter if you wrote the song or not, or if you played the instrument or not. Get him up there, get him recording as much as possible because that is timeless. And kind of tying that into this episode, I think the music really set the scene for it. This is more movie-like of an episode than a TV show. And, you know, when we go to talk about Fire Walk With Me, when we've done that, we said, hey, that was a film. We were able to do more with that than a TV show, right? But it's a visual thing. And I think David Lynch pulled out all the stops that he wanted to and put a stamp on this episode for it. And again, I'll come back to my thing. Interesting. Don't know how much I like it. I don't hate it. It's good. I get it. I hope it means more later on, and I hope we don't have more of it because this is one of those less is more types of things. I've seen enough. I get it. Let's see it play out like the whole science fiction thing I elaborated on earlier. Let's see how it affects humans and their condition and people that we kind of care about or don't or understand. That's where the real payoff is. And I thought you were going to say stuff like, wow, they're really going back in time. They're not even doing anything at all here with Twin Peaks. I want to get back to Twin Peaks. And a part of me was telling you a few episodes ago, I'm okay because I feel like we're going to get there, and I'm okay on the trip getting there. I'm being a little bit more patient and adult-like in it because I tell you, you being the young 20 millennial something year old guy, at that age, I'd be saying, why the hell aren't there in Twin Peaks? That's the name of the damn show. Let's get there already. My sense is the next episode, it's going to be hard and heavy on characters and stuff like that too. I think we're going to totally go away from all this stuff there. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can understand us taking our time getting to Twin Peaks. And, you know, I don't mind Buckhorn or anything like that. I feel like this episode is special. And I do mean it in that kind of special. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy any of it. I thought it was interesting. Yes, very interesting. But this would not go anywhere in this is an episode of Twin Peaks. No, this is an episode of David Lynch.
Yeah, and you said it, I thought, pretty good for hardcore Lynch fans. And they would know what to expect. You said it's the Eraserhead episode of Twin Peaks. I agree with you totally. I think it's a great way to describe it.
Yep. That's all I've got to really say about it. I hope the next one actually takes us back to Earth.
Yeah, well, and yeah, we have to, yeah, and hopefully in the current time, because now it seems like time travel is a potential thing as well too, which I don't know if I'm a fan of that. All right, there you have, ladies and gentlemen, season 3, episode 8 of Twin Peaks. There, the atomic episode. Oh, and of course the bomb. Don't forget the bomb photo behind Cooper's boss's wall that we've pointed out a few times. The name escapes me, but we know who we're talking about. So just saying, don't know if that's going to come into play. I don't know if the young character here is actually Cooper's boss, whose name again I'm blanking on. You know what I'm saying? Gordon Cole. That's it. In Gordon Cole's office, right? Maybe it's Albert. I don't know. It's neat thinking about these things. So it's still giving us some possibilities, which, you know, it's been tantalizing so far. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for checking us out here. We obviously have a Facebook page there, Extreme Movie Show. Check that out too. As we grow the channel, we're really appreciative of the people that take the time to comment, let us know what they like us to cover in terms of movies. And as we go through our Twin Peaks here, we'll at some point actually be trying to decide what to cover after Twin Peaks. But since this journey has been so long and so fruitful, we hope that you've been enjoying it as well. We got about 10 more episodes to go, and then we'll wrap that up here. Looking forward to doing that. For Professor Pixel, everybody involved here at the Extreme Movie Show, I'm your host, Rob. Have a good night. As always, stay extreme.